Hello, this is Frank Lewis, Pastor Frank Lewis, and welcome to another program in which I'm talking about relationships revealed, and the first subject is marriage. And so last week we dealt with pain, and we got into that and we delved into it deeply. But before we go into a summary of last week and also this week, talking about the issues of this week, we're talking about this book, and this book is the book that is the basis of everything that I'm sharing with you about relationships revealed, about all these different kinds of relationships, marriage being the one now. You can get this on Amazon. It's available. People have told me it's an awesome book. I'm very humbled when I hear that, but you want to get this book. And then you can go to the website, relationshipsrevealed.org, and you can actually get the link to the book, Amazon, and you can also read about the titles for the next books and a little bit about relationships revealed. You can also leave your phone name and your email if you want to know more or if you want help. If you want help at all, just leave your email, and if you leave a phone number, I can get back to you much more quickly. That's totally up to you, but I do help a lot of people, and if you really have a need, I'd love to help you. So those are two things you want to be aware of. Now, last week, we talked about pain and how pain causes people to be less than what God created them to be. Satan uses pain very skillfully. He's very good at it. He's done it ever since the garden, and he knows how to cause people to be less than the people they were created to be, because he knows if he can get them to be less than, then they will not be able to fulfill their call and their destiny be of no problem for him. So he brings pain, and pain gets trapped in our body, I told you last week, and it causes sickness and disease. Pain also causes us to believe things about ourselves that aren't true. And that's putting us in a position where we're not the people of God. We're less than. We're going to see ourselves as not valuable, not important, and not worthy because of pain. Pain causes us not to trust mom and dad. If we can't trust mom and dad or any authority, who are we going to trust? We're going to trust ourselves. Pain also causes us not to attach to mom and dad. God designed us for relationship. We must attach to mom and dad, but if we can't, well, then we're going to have what we call attachment pain, and I explained that last week. Go back and look at it, if you will, and it will help you to understand about living in attachment pain and why things can be so difficult. This week, we're actually going to look at how pain produces fear and shame. And we're going to go back to the garden again. We're going to actually look at what happened to Adam and Eve after they disobeyed God, because it's very important for us to know what happened to Adam and Eve, because what happened to Adam and Eve is happening to us today. It's just absolutely following the whole plan that Satan did with Adam and Eve. So we're looking at right now, we're looking at Genesis, I want to get this right here, hang on. Genesis 3:7. Genesis 3:7. So I'm going to read out of my Bible here. You can get your Bible. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. They knew that they were naked, but in Genesis 2:25, I think it's 2:25, let me make absolute certain here, 2:25 it is, they were naked, but they weren't ashamed. So Satan had said to the woman, you're going to know good and evil. You're going to know differently than you've known before. You're going to know good and evil. Well, one of the things that I believe happened is that the knowing changed. after they disobeyed, their knowing, the way they knew something changed. I think it's a very real possibility. Doesn't say it in the Bible, but I think it's a very real possibility that their 5 physical senses were switched on, and now they know by 5 physical sense knowing. And so that became a new way of knowing. Now they said they were naked and they hid. They said, it says in Genesis 3:7, they knew that they were naked. See, how would have they known? They didn't know before because they had not disobeyed God and experienced good and evil. And didn't have that good and evil lodged in their consciousness. So they ended up being in a position where they were naked and they hid. And so that's really something that is vitally important. And we know that something else changed after that. It says in Genesis, remember they made themselves coverings. We're going to come back to that, but coverings we still cover today. We just cover it with a facade and a mask. And I'll get back to that in a little bit, something to keep in mind. And they heard that, Genesis 3:8, and they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid. They hid from the presence of the Lord among the trees in the garden. And Adam said to him, where are you? In verse 9. Verse 10, I heard your voice in the garden and I was afraid. I was afraid. I was naked, and it doesn't say they were ashamed, but they were not ashamed in Genesis 2:25, but now they were ashamed in Genesis 8, and so they were afraid and they hid. Well, we're afraid and we're hiding. Now, one of the things that it doesn't say in the Bible, that in this whole story here in Genesis 3, it doesn't say that it was because of pain. But stop and think about it. Did they have a perfect relationship with God? Yes, they did. They had a perfect relationship with God. And they had a perfect relationship with each other. They didn't even know they were naked. So they couldn't hurt each other. They couldn't cause each other any kind of pain. There was no pain before they disobeyed. But there was pain, we know, after they disobeyed, because anytime you lose a very important relationship, if you lose a spouse and it's unexpected, I lost my wife, but it was a shock, but it wasn't totally unexpected. If you've lost a loved one unexpectedly, a spouse or a child unexpectedly, you felt excruciating amounts of pain. It has been horrible to feel that much pain. And so that Adam and Eve, I'm not sure how they survived it, but Adam and Eve felt excruciating pain of the loss of their relationship with Father God and their loss of relationship with each other. So is it possible that pain that they felt, they decided that they didn't want to have any more pain like that? They never felt pain before. I'm not sure, like I said, how they even got through it. But they felt the pain, and then they hid. And then in Genesis 11, and he said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat? Then the man said, the woman. He started to blame the woman, and the Lord said to the woman, what have you done? And the woman said, the serpent deceived me. And so what happened here? What happened is that we have to ask ourselves, is it possible that they feared punishment, or Satan fed them a misinterpretation or a faulty understanding about God, that God was going to punish them. So they'd have more pain. So that's why they hid, and that's why they blamed. Is that possible? I think it very, very much is possible. And so the whole plan of the devil, as I said last week, is to get us to be something we're not. Well, God didn't create us to hide from him. God wants a relationship with us. He didn't want us to blame. Adam blamed God for making the woman. And Eve blamed the servant for deceiving her. Now, what's really interesting is that Eve was truthful because the serpent did deceive her. Adam blamed God. Was that truthful? No, it wasn't truthful. So Adam chose the woman over God. And are men doing that today? Are men choosing their wives over God and obedience to God? Many times they are. And that might be happening in your marriage. That might be happening in your life. And that's not a good thing, but that's what happened to Adam and Eve. And so they became less than they were created to be. And so they blamed, and they felt fear and shame. It's the first time that they felt fear. Pain produced fear, and then shame happens when they believed and saw that they not believed, they actually knew that they were naked. And so they sewed fig leaves together. And so we now realize that this whole story of the garden is a story that's being reenacted every single day, every minute of every day, all around the world, because people are feeling that the pain that they had in childhood is causing them to have fear of having more pain. That's how Satan does this. He brings pain, and then the person, myself, you, we don't want more pain. So what do? We hide. We cover our face with fig leaves. We hide behind a facade and a mask. And that's something that we don't want to have happen if we're going to be in a marriage relationship or any relationship. We can't be hiding, and we can't be people that are less than who they are, because what we'll do is we'll present the best us, and the best us is not what God intended, and it won't be the real us. And if the real us doesn't meet the real spouse, then what happens if the real you doesn't meet the real spouse that you're married to, or when you get married, what happens is there is no intimacy. There is no sharing of the deepest parts of a self. Now, see, that's what they could do before they ended up with the knowledge of good and evil and all this pain that Satan made sure that they got. So fear actually is used by Satan to keep us, fear of more pain is used by Satan to keep us locked up in an emotional prison. And shame keeps us there. Just remember that. Most of you are locked up in emotional prisons. Why? Because you're afraid of more pain. You don't want more pain. You don't want more pain like you had when you were a child. You don't want more pain like you may be having right now. You don't like it. It's not good for you. You don't like it. And what happens is that fear of more pain keeps us from being the people that God created us to be. And so we end up being less than the people that we're supposed to be. Now let's look a little bit into fear. And what is fear? Well, fear is an emotion of protection. It's a protective emotion. It's an emotion that we actually experience when there's imminent danger, when we're going to have something happen to us that's that's dangerous, could even take our lives or could hurt us. And so we have this emotion of fear. And so that's a good thing, but the problem is that it becomes less than a good thing when we realize that fear actually will cause us to have the response of fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze. And it's an involuntary response because we're trying to protect ourselves by fighting, freezing, just hoping it'll go away, and then just trying to get out from the painful situation. So we fight, flight, or freeze. Well, what happens is that in that position, we are in a place where we are going to end up having an involuntary reaction, and it's below conscious thought. If it's below conscious thought, as it is, then what's going to happen is we are not going to be able to stop a fight, flight, or freeze response to a perceived or an actual threat against our lives or against our bodies or against our, who we are. We're not going to be able to stop it. It's going to take place whether we like it or not. We can't control it. And that's very, very important. This is one of the reasons that Satan uses pain to control us. Because what happens is we cannot control it, but we're trying to control it, so we become controllers. I've said that to you before. We become controllers. We don't want more pain, so we become controllers. And that it puts us in a position where we are controlling everything in our world, and that's not really what we want to do. That's what happened to me, as a matter of fact. I got a lot of pain from my father. Started at 1.5, 2 years of age, and then he just kept on and on and on because he ended up in a situation where he caused more and more pain to the point where I knew I wasn't valuable, important, and worthy, but I felt I was defective. I think I told you about that last time. So I feared pain and tried to control everything in my life. I became a super controller. You may be a super controller. You may fear loss of control because when you're out of control as a child, you got pain. And so I was a super controller. And I tried to control everything in my world. By the way, control is an illusion. It really is not that we can control anybody. The Bible says we're supposed to have self-control. That's the only one we can control. But we think we can control, and so we try to control everything to keep ourselves from having pain. If you're a perfectionist, by the way, then you are fearing loss of control. Fearing loss of control puts us in a position where Satan has a legal right to, because of fear, to bring in more and more pain. So the fear of loss of control really keeps us stuck. It keeps us in an emotional prison, and we end up having more and more pain. And what happens is if you have too much pain and you are criticized too much, you are punished too much, you have too much of a father or a mother berating you and causing, you to feel like you're worthless, what will happen is you'll have a shame-based self-image. It's based in shame. What's shame? Well, shame is, in one sense, shame keeps us from hurting people, because we feel some of that shame. That's a benign shame. It doesn't hurt us. The other shame is toxic shame. And what toxic shame does, it's not a belief that we're doing something bad. It's a belief that we are bad. It's not a belief that we're just doing something that's hurting somebody. It's a belief that we have about ourselves that's not based in anything other than a painful reality that we are worthless, that we have no value, that we are valueless, and it causes our self-image to be based upon the understanding or the belief, I guess would be better said, the belief that we are defective, that we are not capable of functioning in the world in which we live. That's what happens to children and they grow up into adults that have been really through a lot of pain. If you have shame-based parents that believe that they're worthless, then you're going to believe you're worthless. It's just going to continue on and on and on. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this work and writing this book, is because I want you to not have to live in shame. I lived in toxic shame my whole life. It controlled me. I did not know what to do about it, and I didn't understand it. And it's very, very powerful. Toxic shame is very, very powerful. And it causes us to believe that we just have no value. And if you were raised with believing that you have no value, then you're living in shame. And like Adam did, you're going to be hiding. What are you going to be hiding? You're going to be hiding the real you. You're going to be hiding who you really are, because you don't know what's going to happen if somebody knows what you know, what you believe, that you're worthless, you're defective, you're just a piece of junk. And God didn't say that, but that's what you believe, and that's what I believe for most of my life. And so it's very dangerous. Toxic shame is very, very, very difficult to deal with. I'm going to actually read you just a little section of this book here, of my book. I want you to listen to this. This is on page 56 of the book. Toxic shame tends to direct you into destructive behaviors. When you focus on what you did wrong, you can correct it. But when you believe something is wrong with you, then your sense of self is eroded. This is why it is not guilt, but shame that produces anger, rage, and other irrational behaviors. I was a man of rage. I was raised by a rageaholic, narcissistic doctor, but I raged at my kids, raged at my first wife. Because why? Because I believed things about myself that I was worthless. This is exactly what happened to me. Because of my father's abuse, I hated myself. See, I not only believed I wasn't defective, but I hated myself. I was afraid that everyone would hate me because I hated myself, so I hid behind a facade and a mask, always terrified that I would be exposed. I withdrew and from and did not want to be around people. I would numb my feelings and ended up with tremendous feelings of shame. I did discover at the leading of the Lord how to get out of, how to resolve toxic shame, and that was very, very good. But the problem is that when I married my wife, the real me was not marrying the real her. She had problems in her life, and so she was she was presenting well, hiding behind a facade and a mask. She didn't want to be exposed. I didn't want to be exposed. So we've got two people that don't want to be exposed. That's probably the kind of marriage you're in. And what happens is there can be no intimacy. There's no real emotional connection. We're wired by God for needing emotional connection. If there can't be emotional connection, then what's going to happen is your marriage is going to be less than satisfying. It's going to be not life-producing, not life-giving. It's going to be, all those things we talked about weeks before. You're going to be one up, one down. You'll suck the life out of you. You'll be codependent. All those things. That's not what you want. But shame will keep you there. And shame is very, very, very dangerous for that reason. It can definitely keep you in a position where you will not allow yourself to be known. If you can't be known, then you can't have into me you see. And your wife and you, all human beings are wired to be known, wired to be loved for who they are, not what they do. And so it's vitally important that you understand that how powerful pain is, and it produces fear and shame. Fear of more pain causing you to not want to be known, not want to be the real person you are, not even knowing who you are, because you are living with this fear of pain and the shame of that has been internalized, that causes you to believe that you're defective and maybe even hate yourself like I did. And so that is the huge problem that we're dealing with in marriages. Now, see, I want you to have the best marriage, a marriage made in heaven that you can have on earth. The way you're going to get that is you're going to learn how to be able to deal with fear and shame. And we got to get to that point. But before we do, I'm going to talk to you next week about rejection. How powerful is rejection? Because Satan uses rejection like he used because of fear and shame. So we're going to deal with that next week, and we're going to continue dealing with these things that are keeping you from having a great marriage and from having real trust in God and really having the abundant life that God promised, that Jesus promised, and having a really wonderful marriage. Because see, I'm here to help you to have the best marriage you can possibly ever have. And that's what this is all about. And you will have that marriage